Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about 6 tips to increase your Instagram story views and engagement. So the videos we've done recently about Instagram stories, you guys have seemed to really love. So we're going to dive even deeper into how exactly to get more views in your stories, to reach more people, to get more DMs, more people interacting with your stories, all of those different things. I'm going to be talking about my top 6 things that I think about and how I get more views on my stories. My first tip right here is to be very strategic about the first few stories when you either haven't posted at all in the last 24 hours or it's been a long time since you've posted stories. So what I mean by this is those first few stories are probably going to be what most people see, right? And it's also what Instagram is going to use to decide if they should push your overall, like all your stories out to more of your followers. And so use those first few stories very strategically in the sense of like, think about what kind of content is typically very engaging for your audience. What typically gets more views, gets more DMs or interactions. Think about those kinds of things and what kinds of stories would be more interesting. And for me, I know that a lot of times just sharing about my life and motherhood and all of that stuff over on my Instagram account at Stephanie Lynn Case generally does really well. And so I also think about this in the sense of like, I want the content to be my own content and not necessarily other people's content for those first few slides. So like if I want to reshare a post or a graphic or reshare someone else's story, I'm probably not going to do that if I haven't posted on my stories in like 20 hours, right? I want those first few stories to be like myself showing up on stories or, sharing something about what's going on that day in my life, but I don't want the first few stories to be something more irrelevant or more just like resharing someone else's content, because at least for me, those typically don't do like as well as some of my own original content. And so I want to make sure like I like incorporating those into my stories as I go throughout the day. But this also kind of goes along with think of your stories as a story, right? And so what makes sense to have at the beginning of a set of stories, probably not sharing someone else's content, probably makes a lot more sense to, kind of start with the beginning of the day and share something that's going to catch someone's attention a little bit more. My second tip here for increasing views and engagement on your stories is to experiment. And this might seem like a really simple tip, but I think it's something that a lot of us don't do enough, is to simply experiment with sharing content and understand that not every single piece of content you share, whether it's stories or something else, is going to blow up and be the best piece of content you've ever shared, right? Which is why it's important to not only look at views, but also make sure it's something that relates to your niche and your audience is actually going to like. But I want to encourage you to just experiment and try sharing different stories. Maybe resharing other people's like graphic posts does work really well with your audience. Or maybe there's a certain type of story you notice does really well on your account. And we'll actually talk more later about that and analyzing your analytics and how you can do that. But definitely just give yourself that permission to experiment and to try different things and try sharing different types of stories. Maybe if you've never shown up on stories like talking to the camera, try that and see if that resonates well with your audience. Maybe if you've never tried doing a Q&A with a bunch of written text your audience can read and learn about, try doing that. I found that works really well for my audience. I've incorporated that more into my content recently. So just give yourself that permission. Like even if something flops, it doesn't mean that it failed. It means that you're just learning and you can take that and use that to help guide your content in the future. My third tip here is to use Instagram's story features. Instagram absolutely loves it when we take advantage of the features that they've provided to us within the apps, and specifically with stories. You think about the emoji sliders, question boxes, polls, quizzes, all of those different things are amazing ways to not only take advantage of the features that Instagram has given to us, but also those things genuinely do help drive engagement on your stories and people actually tapping and engaging with your story, which tells Instagram that people are liking your story, and then in turn push it out to more of your followers. Another really fun feature that Instagram has been doing recently or has recently come out with is called Share Yours, and they've become definitely more popular within the app. So if you see a Share Yours on someone else's story, you can tap on the little box and you can share your own photo or whatever the prompt is. So it's basically like a prompt for you to share your own picture of you when you were this certain age or in this certain year, or maybe your pet or something like that. And that can be a really fun way to kind of join in the conversation and what's happening on the app on Instagram. Another really fun way to drive engagement with and thinking about this is doing Q&A. I know I mentioned the question boxes can be a great way to use Instagram's Instagram's features. I personally have incorporated weekly Q&A into my own Instagram account, have seen that do really, really well as far as engagement and views and all of that. And you can start off doing more of like a themed Q&A too, and pick a topic that your audience can ask you questions on. I found that especially if you have a smaller audience, that definitely works better and gives people more ideas of what kind of questions that they could ask. All right, tip number 4 is to limit links. Okay, so I know that it like used to be a really big deal to hit 10,000 followers so that you could have access to share links on your stories, right? But I'm here to say that sharing links isn't all that it seems to be. And even though like obviously we want to use these platforms to grow our brand, grow our business, and that means probably sharing some links, right? Whether it's to our email list or free downloads or even paid offerings or affiliate links and things like that. But I do want to encourage you to not go too overboard or crazy with this and to limit the links that you're sharing a little bit. So I've even gotten more strategic when I'm posting the links, like at what point in my stories is it like, am I going to post a link in the very first slide? Probably not. Am I going to make sure I've posted at least 3 or 4 stories before I share some sort of link? Probably, because for me, I've seen that work a lot better. And the reason why is I think because Instagram, one, doesn't want you to keep sending people off of their app. They want you to keep people on their app. Obviously, you can share links. Like, doesn't mean you can't share links to anything, but if it consistently takes people off of their app and maybe onto another app and not coming back, then they're probably not going to love that as much. So what I found to be really helpful, again, I'll show you at the end, analyzing your analytics and looking at that, and pay attention to what links are actually getting clicked on, because if you have certain types of links that are getting clicked on a lot, those ones are definitely better to share because people are actually engaging and interacting with your story, which tells Instagram, again, push it out to more people. But if you are sharing links and only getting 2 link clicks, maybe it's time to revisit and rethink, okay, maybe I should have them DM me for more information, where then I can give them a link with more information in the DMs, and that might turn out better, and then I might get more views on my story, right? And so yeah, so just thinking about that and making sure you're not going too crazy, but also, again, look at your analytics, see what kind of links are actually getting clicked on and that your audience is actually interested in, because it's harder than you might think to get people to actually click on a link in your stories. Tip number 5 is to show up as you. I know this probably already sounds kind of cheesy, but I just want to encourage you that Instagram stories is truly an amazing place to share more unfiltered, like behind the scenes look of your life, your day-to-day, of your business, of your brand, whatever you're using Instagram for. It's such an awesome way to share content that doesn't have to be super curated. It can be super on the fly. You don't have to overthink it. Just share about you, your life, what's happening, and people really do love and can see when you are genuinely sharing about you and yourself and who you are and the things that you love, the quirks about yourself, the little things that you love, the fun facts about you, right? And so just incorporating that personality and your personal brand is going to make such a big difference in standing out on Instagram and being genuine and connecting with your audience, and not always just focusing on trying to get more numbers and more views and more reach and more DMs and all of that, but also pay attention to like, how can I connect genuinely with the people who follow me, and having a personal brand, incorporating you into your content, especially on stories, because it's very behind the scenes, very like unfiltered, uncurated. It's such a great way to do that. All right, and then tip number 6 is to look at your analytics. At the end of the day, I can give you all of these tips, all of these ideas, all of these suggestions, but what might work really well on my account might not work well on your account. And so that's why it's important, again, going back to that tip about experimenting, that's why it's really important to experiment, but also to consistently be looking at your analytics to see, okay, now that I've done that experimenting, what's worked? What can I do more of? And that also is almost like your audience talking back to you, right? In an indirect way, and telling you like what they like seeing from you, what they're actually interested in, what they are engaging with. And, you know, maybe people will say they're interested in one type of content, but it tends to always flop, right? And so what they're actually engaging with might be something really different. So looking at your analytics is very, very important in order to see more growth on the app and to get seen by more of your followers. Now I have my phone pulled up with my, like, logged into my Instagram. I'm gonna go to my creator tools and we're gonna go to account insights and tap on see all right there. And I'm just going to show you what it looks like to analyze your stories analytics and what, or I guess technically I should say insights. It's like the analytics on Instagram. It's called insights. I'm gonna show you how I would look at this and then decide from there like what I might want to share more of. So right now it's just set to the last 14 days. So I'm actually gonna change this to the last 30 days to get a more like comprehensive view of the past month and what has worked really well on my own stories. So I'm just looking, and so my personal brand is very like motherhood, sharing about my twins, twin life, all of that, very focused on those topics. So that's what we're working with right here. So if we're looking at this, I can tell that first of all, this first story was me sharing about my twins turning 6 months old, which is super fun, that a lot of people genuinely liked it. And this is focused on reach at the top. If we tap on where it says reach, you can actually change this to like replies, or let's see, next story. So who like saw the story and then wanted to tap on to your next story and stay. That can be really interesting. And then you can also look at like link clicks and different things like that. Or story interactions is a great one too. We're gonna stick to reach first, is like this amount of story views that you get. And then we'll look at a couple different other things after that. So looking at this, I can tell that sharing about my twins turning 6 months. So to me, that tells me like when my twins hit milestones, it's still very beneficial for me to share about that in my stories, even if I'm doing a feed post on it. Like it's not too redundant that my audience isn't interested in seeing it twice, basically. So that's really interesting to know. I also think it's really interesting that this first story right here, it did have a little slider for cake, like to celebrate basically. And so I am really curious when we look at story interactions if it'll still be towards the top or not. And then the second one here did have a link. And so that is very interesting. That ended up being my second one. But I think because I incorporated, it had 41 link clicks, which isn't too bad, but I incorporated the link like within photos and like kind of very seamlessly within the story, because I know this was a set of stories of my twins in the little hats. So those did pretty well. As we keep going, I reshared my husband's story of my baby wearing a hat over her eyes, which actually did really well, which is very funny because normally when I reshare other people's stories, those don't do as well. But maybe people like seeing my people like seeing my husband. Every time I do something with him or share him, like people just like it. So maybe that has something to do with it. The next one is doing one of those share yours. So this one was sharing your labor and or push times for your babies. So I was sharing like basically my own, share yours, and that one did pretty well. I shared let's see, behind the scenes, I believe this was a TikTok video of me getting ready with my twins. That was like a time lapse. So people like seeing that like behind the scenes. Yeah, so as I'm going down, I can just see like which ones have done better. Some of these are like time lapses. So time lapses definitely are towards the top here. I'm also going to scroll all the way to the bottom and see what stories did not do very well, and just very curious. And also I have to keep in mind like some of these might be because maybe I posted like 30 story slides that day and some of them were towards the end. So when I look at this, there is one where I linked to the very bottom, I linked to a TikTok video. So that one didn't do as well. So a couple of my dogs, apparently people are not as interested in my dogs as maybe I think they are. A couple of them are like answers to questions, which totally makes sense because like whenever I do Q&As, there's literally so many questions that I answer. So some of them are just going to be down towards the end. So a lot of these look like they're questions. I did this like here's a twin must-haves link. That one didn't get as many views, but I remember, I got 119 link clicks, which is actually really good for getting 1,800 views. So that's very interesting that like, again, I think Instagram doesn't necessarily love it when you're just pushing out. And I remember when I posted that too, I don't think I had really posted many stories that day. And I led up to it with, it's a poll. I had a poll like that said, twin moms want to know what my favorite twin products are, and then linked that in the next slide. So I think that helped, but definitely didn't do as good as it could have done. So if I maybe had started that set of stories that day, like with something else and then led into that, probably would have done a lot better. So yeah, okay, so let's go all the way back to the top. Now we're gonna change this from reach. I'm gonna do story interactions. If we tap on that. Okay, so you can already see it's looking, the top stories with top interactions are already very different from the stories. And I don't think it's calculating like people who tap on like an emoji slider or something, because it only says 17, but I know I usually had like a couple hundred people at least. or even like quizzes and polls and stuff. So that's kind of frustrating. I'm not sure why it's not incorporating that. I think these are replies. So you can see like this top one right here, like that wasn't even in the top stories, but it got the most story replies, which is very interesting. I think it's me nursing like a time lapse of that. So very interesting to know. Like that does generate, and these are all, a lot of these are time lapses. So a lot of those do tend to generate more like engagement with my, all right, next one I'm interested to look at is link clicks. I'm always curious about that because again, at the end of the day, we want to be using our platform to grow our brand, and that probably means linking to stuff. So as I'm looking at this, I'm just looking at like, what is my audience interested in knowing about from me? Like what do they actually click on, right? So I can see apparently people liked learning about my jacket and knowing that it was on sale. They liked learning about what high chairs I use, the twin product must-haves. And then as we keep going down, actually those roundups do pretty good. Like the baby travel favorites, breastfeeding must-haves, twin product must-haves. As we keep going down, let's see. So a lot of these have 0 link clicks. So, which, yeah, none of those even have links. So let me go to the last one that has a link. Okay, like I linked, let's see here. A random dress link, farm-fed box, camera lens, car seat link, which is very interesting. It just seems like it is very random. So I feel like looking at this, the roundups do very well as like when I'm screenshotting a DM, basically like social proof, like other people want to know what this is, and then linking the same thing. I could also say if there's something that I wear that's like going like on sale, like letting my audience know about that does pretty well, obviously. So it had 200 link clicks. So yeah, I think that's super helpful to know just for the future and like guiding what content I can make more of. And I think the more consistent I would be too with the roundups, that like I probably would see more interaction, even more interaction on those, because people get used to seeing those from me. If you haven't already, be sure to check out that free sample Instagram posting schedule down in the description. There's a link right there. And we really created this based on like, you know, when it comes to stories and feed posts and reels and all of those things, we get so many questions from you guys about like how often you should be posting, what should you be posting. It does change based on like what your goals are for Instagram and also what season of business you're in. So be sure to grab that free posting schedule. It's going to be really, really helpful in just helping to guide you in that area. And we can't wait for you guys to snag it. It's going to be super fun. And we also post new or upload new videos every Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So be sure to subscribe so you can see more videos when we upload them in the future. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye guys.